Hey, so this one's maybe a little bit different. I want to discuss Facebook, social media, and responsibility. I guess those are the three main themes of this one. Um, I've noticed that there are a number of groups on Facebook, right? Well, that's an understatement. Of course, there's many, many groups on Facebook, thousands. But I've been members of various different groups due to perhaps I believe in the particular cause or the collective initiative or whatever it might be. And I find that one problem that sometimes occurs online is that groups unfortunately lose their direction because of something very simple, and that is they will not adhere to their own supposed founding principles. I don't want to say mission statements, but if you go to any group on Facebook that has some sort of cause or ideology going on, they'll have a description section. And it will usually be this group is for everyone who believes in, wants this, etc. And they'll almost always have some house rules. Now, just a disclaimer here, I've been the admin of a number of groups myself. I've been pretty inactive of late, so it's not something that's particularly relevant to this video insofar as I haven't really been active on those groups for a long time. They've kind of become defunct because I didn't have the time to manage them or whatever. But I always took the approach that if I'm going to admin a group, then I may go back to those, I don't know. But anyway, I don't want to derail the point of the video. Um, I find it disappointing that you get groups that pretend to be about one particular thing and then they're hijacked by another. So I'm going to quote some examples. Um, and if anyone's associated with these groups, maybe you'll disagree with me, but it's highly unlikely. So there was a group called UK Politics. I was invited to it. It was just a group for discussing UK politics. And that sounded okay. I'm interested in politics. I'm pretty opinionated. So I thought, okay, well, I'll see how this plays out. And at first it was all right. There was some interesting discussion there, some interesting members. It was quite sizable. I think it was about 3 or 4 thousand members. But anyway, um, I decided to quit it last year because it just started getting hijack's maybe a strong word, but it started allowing one idea to override, and that was, with the Brexit thing, it started allowing people who voted leave to just dominate the whole thread, the whole discussion, to the point where, and by dominate, I mean they would basically get away with things that were not constructive, that weren't generating debate. It wasn't just legitimate debate about Brexit, which was fine. That's, been the most important aspect of British politics over the past 4 years. But this was basically just ad hominem attacks, memes that were designed just to shit stir, nothing else. They weren't even particularly clever. And I just got tired of the admins not acting on it because their own description read that they wanted a respectful place for people to discuss different views. Not a safe space. That's a totally different thing. I'm not a fan of safe spaces. But they did say respectful, right? And I have to say, memes, I have mixed views on them. A good meme can be quite witty and it can be relevant. It's kind of the 21st century equivalent, I guess, of parody in the past. It has a role as a biting political tool. But I also think memes can be lazy, infantile, and definitely not constructive to adult debate. Um, so I'm not a massive fan of them. But anyway, that's just one example. It started getting dominated by people who were polarizing other members because they were making it all about Brexit. Now, in a similar theme, I joined a group. I've made no secret of the fact that I strongly believe in the United Kingdom. So I joined a group that was opposing Scottish independence, and it was for the United Kingdom. Now, again, that got derailed because instead of focusing on the issue at hand, countering the arguments of Scottish nationalists and so on, it started getting into a Brexit issue. So all that done was started polarizing members like myself who were for the United Kingdom against Scottish independence, but also had voted Remain. So it started getting into this very polarizing thing of making it about Brexit when the initial thing was about keeping the UK together. It started getting into, um, just tarnishing Remain voters, and so I left because it was totally dishonest in my opinion. It derailed from what its original purpose was meant to be. If it had stuck to the issue of Scottish independence, that would be one thing, but they started lumping in Remainers and Scottish independence advocates as the collective enemy, and it just got really short-sighted and tribal in that way, very unhelpful. And I've had yet another experience recently where I was invited to a group called the Milk Tea Alliance. Now, you may be familiar with this. It's a group that's active in a number of Asian countries. Led by young people in China, Hong Kong, particularly Hong Kong, Thailand, the Philippines. And basically, it's young people who are active against authoritarianism, speaking out on human rights issues, but particularly against authoritarian governments. Most vocally against the CCP in China, but they're also to a lesser extent against the Thai military junta and the presidency of Rodrigo Duterte in the Philippines. Now, that's something I very much believe in because I'm very against the CCP. And I was very supportive of the Hong Kong protests last year. So naturally, I accepted the request to join this. Unfortunately, that's now been hijacked by American partisan politics, with a lot of members coming out with their dogged support for Donald Trump, and in so doing, they're polarizing other members because they're smearing anyone who votes for Joe Biden or supports Joe Biden or doesn't support Donald Trump as being a Chinese agent. So they're getting into this very ridiculous thing, and it's full of memes. It's full of collective attacks on anyone who thinks differently, and it's unfortunately hijacked by that. I have raised the point. I haven't left the group just yet. I have said this is being overtaken by, as I put it, Trump cultists. And I stand by that. I'm talking not about people just who support Donald Trump, but people who are so dogged in their support that they see everything as fake news. Now, the irony of this is those people who are still parroting this line that the Democrats stole the election, all they're doing is playing into the hand of Chinese state media, and they don't see it. And then they have the audacity to say the rest of us are somehow Chinese agents. And it's a very sad thing because we should have a collective purpose in that group. There should be a collective opposition to the CCP. But instead, the Trump voters, um, to a lesser extent, the Biden people, but I'm saying voters, they're not even, a lot of them aren't even Americans, but they're so, they believe that Trump is much better for Hong Kong than Biden is, and they might be right, but they're polarizing members by turning it into a Trump cult site. Like you're either with Donald Trump or you're fake news or you're a traitor or you're a communist. And, it's pathetic and it's very polarizing. And it's definitely, in my view, taking the direction away from what the group's meant to be. Although I have to say, when I raised a contention about this, I did get quite a lot of support for that. So sometimes, the most vocal opinions isn't necessarily the majority. But anyway, there's a point to all of this, and it is this: it's responsibility. If someone runs a group on Facebook, or any group for that matter, but just using Facebook as an example, if they're the admin or they're one of the admins, and they have a certain set of principles about talking to each other in respectful ways, about having in-house rules, the most depressing thing is when they won't stick to them themselves. They talk about respect and then they won't show respect, or they will break their own rules, or they'll turn a blind eye to other people breaking the rules just because they ideologically favor them. So it's really unfortunate that a lot of groups that would otherwise be worthy, decent groups of discussion get hijacked and derailed by nonsense and infantile behavior. And I've seen it many times. And it's really unfortunate. If I ever find more time and I get back to a position where I have more time to run groups, I would certainly be very stringent in upholding the rules that I set out or I, co-author. I think it's very important. And I'm just wondering if anyone else has had this experience where you join a group on Facebook because you assume it's going to be like-minded people and there's going to be some adult discussion going on, then it just gets hijacked by nonsense. Unfortunately, it's happened more times than I care to remember. Maybe that's the veneer of a computer screen. People think they can behave that way. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts.